Lucas, a boy with a special gift, discovers the mountains hold more than trees and stones. A living, pulsing connection that protects humanity. But when threats arise, can the wisdom of the past save the future? In the mist-shrouded peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where ancient trees whispered secrets to the wind, Sarah Johnson stood at her kitchen window, watching the early morning fog roll across their sprawling backyard. The steam from her coffee cup mingled with her breath on the cold glass as she observed her son, 5-year-old Lucas, playing near the tree line. His laughter echoed through the crisp mountain air, a sound that brought both joy and anxiety to her heart. The Johnsons had moved to this remote mountain community 6 months ago, seeking a fresh start after Michael, Sarah's husband, had accepted a position as the head surgeon at the local hospital. The transition hadn't been easy, especially for Sarah, who had left behind a promising career as a wildlife photographer in Seattle. But it was Lucas who had surprised them the most, adapting to their new home with an enthusiasm that bordered on the mysterious. "Lucas, honey, don't go too far," Sarah called out, noticing how her son seemed drawn to the dense forest that bordered their property. He had always been an unusual child, sensitive and intuitive beyond his years. But lately, his behavior had become increasingly peculiar. She had caught him several times speaking to someone or something at the edge of the woods, and when asked about it, he would simply smile and say, "My friend is watching over me." The sound of heavy footsteps on the wooden floors announced Michael's presence before he entered the kitchen, his hospital scrubs already on, ready for another long shift. "Has he been talking to his imaginary friend again?" he asked, reaching for his travel mug. The concern in his voice was poorly masked by his attempt at casual conversation. Sarah turned to face her husband, the worry lines around her eyes more pronounced than usual. "Michael, I don't think it's just imagination anymore. Yesterday I found these near his toy box." She reached into her pocket and pulled out several large, dark hairs, coarse and wild-looking. "They're too big to be from any domestic animal." Michael examined the hairs with professional detachment, but Sarah could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. "I'll have them analyzed at the hospital's lab," he said finally, pocketing the mysterious findings. "But Sarah, we need to be rational about this. We're in the mountains. It could be from any number of wildlife species." Just then, Lucas came bounding into the kitchen, his cheeks flushed from the cold mountain air. "Mommy, Daddy, guess what? My friend showed me where the sweet berries grow. Can I go pick some after school?" His eyes sparkled with excitement, but there was something else there too, a knowledge that seemed far too ancient for his young face. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances, their silent communication heavy with shared concern. "Sweet berries?" Michael asked, kneeling down to Lucas's level. "Where exactly did you see these berries, buddy?" "In the special place," Lucas replied cryptically, "where the big trees make a circle and the rocks look like sleeping giants. My friend says they're safe to eat. He's been watching over them for years and years." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the mountain weather. The way Lucas spoke about his friend was becoming more detailed, more specific, and there was something about the mention of years and years that made her maternal instincts surge with both protection and curiosity. As Michael left for his shift at the hospital, he pulled Sarah aside at the door. "I've been thinking," he whispered, glancing back at Lucas, who was now contentedly drawing at the kitchen table. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Eleanor Martinez. She's not just a pediatrician, she grew up in these mountains. If anyone would understand these unusual circumstances, it would be her." Sarah nodded, watching as Michael's car disappeared down the winding mountain road. She turned back to find Lucas holding up his drawing, a crude but unmistakable sketch of what appeared to be a massive dark figure standing protectively over a small child. The detail that caught her eye, however, was not the size of the figure, but the startlingly intelligent eyes Lucas had drawn, filled with an almost human-like wisdom. As she hung the drawing on the refrigerator, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of discovering something extraordinary. The mountains seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the moment when all would be revealed. But for now, she had to prepare Lucas for school, all while wondering what other secrets her young son and these ancient mountains were keeping from them. If this story has captured your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Let us know which city you're watching from in the comments below. Now, let's continue with our story. Dr. Eleanor Martinez's office was nothing like the sterile medical environment Sarah was used to. Native American dream catchers hung from rough-hewn wooden beams, and the walls were adorned with local artwork depicting the mountain landscapes. The distinguished pediatrician sat across from Sarah, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat braid, her dark eyes sharp with interest as she listened to Sarah's concerns. "And you say Lucas has been talking about this friend for how long?" Dr. Martinez asked, making notes in a leather-bound journal rather than the typical medical chart. Sarah shifted in her chair, anxiety making her voice waver. "It started about 2 months ago. At first, we thought it was just an imaginary friend, normal childhood development and all that, but then..." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small plastic bag containing the mysterious hairs she had found. "There's this, and the way he speaks about his friend. He knows things about the mountain that we've never taught him." Dr. Martinez carefully examined the hairs, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Johnson, how much do you know about the history of these mountains?" she asked finally, setting the bag down on her desk with deliberate care. "Only what's in the tourist brochures," Sarah admitted. "Michael and I were focused on the good schools and the hospital position when we moved here." The doctor rose from her desk and walked to a large bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines until she found what she was looking for. An old leather-bound volume that looked like it had survived several generations. "The Blue Ridge Mountains have been home to many legends," she began, returning to her seat. "But there's one that's been passed down through my family for generations. We call it the Legend of the Guardian." Sarah leaned forward, her photographer's instincts sensing a story worth capturing. Dr. Martinez opened the book, revealing yellowed pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches. "According to our oral traditions, these mountains have always been protected by a special guardian, a creature of extraordinary intelligence and compassion. The early settlers called it the Gentle Giant, but to my people it was known as the Wisdom Keeper." "Are you suggesting that Lucas's friend?" Sarah's voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought that seemed too fantastic to voice. Dr. Martinez's eyes twinkled with knowing wisdom. "I'm suggesting that your son may have been chosen. Throughout our history, there have been stories of children who could communicate with the Guardian. They were considered blessed, bridging the gap between our world and the natural realm." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Lab results back. You need to see this." Attached was a photo of a scientific report, but what caught her eye was the highlighted section. "DNA analysis inconclusive. Sample shows unprecedented genetic markers." Dr. Martinez noticed Sarah's pale expression and gently closed the book. "Mrs. Johnson, there's something else you should know. These children who were chosen, they all shared a special mark, a small, crescent-shaped birthmark, usually on their right shoulder." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Just that morning, while helping Lucas dress for school, she had noticed a new mark on his shoulder, a perfect crescent shape that she could have sworn wasn't there before. "The marking isn't random," Dr. Martinez continued, her voice taking on an urgent tone. According to our legends, it appears when the Guardian has chosen a child to help protect the mountains from a coming threat. Has Lucas mentioned anything about danger or changes in the forest? As if on cue, Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Mountain Development Project approved. Blue Ridge Luxury Resort to begin construction this spring. The artist's rendering showed a massive complex carved into the mountainside, precisely in the area where Lucas had been talking about his special place with the sweetberries. Dr. Martinez's expression grew grave as she looked at the news article. Mrs. Johnson, I believe your son's connection to the Guardian isn't just a coincidence. The mountains are calling for help, and they've chosen Lucas as their voice. The question is, are you ready to listen to what they have to say? The drive home from Dr. Martinez's office felt surreal to Sarah, her mind racing with questions about Lucas's mysterious connection to the mountains. As she pulled into their driveway, she noticed Michael's car already parked. He had come home early from his hospital shift, something he rarely did. She found Michael in his home office, surrounded by scientific papers and historical documents spread across his desk. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened and hair tousled from running his fingers through it repeatedly. "Sarah, you need to see this," he said without looking up. "Those hairs we found, the DNA results are unlike anything I've ever seen. The genetic structure shows markers that suggest highly evolved cognitive function, but it's not matching any known species in our database." Sarah sank into the chair across from him, Dr. Martinez's words echoing in her mind. "Michael, I learned something today that might sound crazy, but..." She was interrupted by the sound of Lucas's excited voice from the backyard. Through the office window, they watched as their son ran toward the forest edge, waving excitedly at something they couldn't see. But what caught their attention was the strange golden light that seemed to follow him, dancing through the trees like fireflies in daylight. "Lucas, wait!" Sarah called out, rushing outside with Michael close behind. As they approached, they saw their son standing at the forest's edge, engaged in what appeared to be an animated conversation with thin air. But the air around him seemed to shimmer, and the leaves on the nearby trees rustled despite the lack of wind. "Mommy, Daddy, my friend says it's time," Lucas exclaimed, turning to them with eyes bright with excitement. "He wants to show you something important. He says you need to understand before it's too late." Michael stepped forward, his scientific skepticism warring with the inexplicable scene before him. "Buddy, who exactly are you talking to?" "The Wisdom Keeper," Lucas replied matter-of-factly, using the same name Dr. Martinez had mentioned. "He's been protecting these mountains forever, but now he needs our help. The sleeping giants are crying." Sarah and Michael exchanged worried glances, but before they could respond, a deep rumbling sound emanated from the forest. The trees swayed gently, and a warm breeze carried the scent of sweetberries and pine. Lucas smiled knowingly and took his parents' hands. "Come on," he said, tugging them toward a barely visible path. "He wants to show you the sacred place." As they followed their son deeper into the forest, Sarah noticed strange markings on the trees, ancient symbols that seemed to glow with a faint inner light. Michael, ever the scientist, touched one of the markings and pulled his hand back in surprise. "It's warm," he whispered, "and there's a slight electrical charge, but that's scientifically impossible." The path led them to a clearing they had never noticed before, despite living here for months. Massive rocks formed a perfect circle, each one bearing the same mysterious symbols they had seen on the trees. In the center stood a giant, ancient oak tree, its branches reaching out in all directions like protective arms. Lucas walked confidently to the oak and placed his small hand on its trunk. The crescent birthmark on his shoulder began to glow with the same golden light they had seen earlier. "This is where it all started," he said, his voice carrying a wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. This is where the first Guardian made a promise to protect the mountains. Suddenly, the air around them filled with what appeared to be thousands of floating lights, forming images in the air like a natural hologram. Sarah gasped as she recognized scenes from the mountain's history playing out before them. Native tribes living in harmony with the land, the arrival of the first settlers, and a massive, dark figure watching over it all, protecting and guiding. The mountains remember everything, Lucas explained as the lights danced around them. And now they're showing us because they need our help. The sleeping giants are in danger, and if they fall, the Guardian's promise will be broken. Michael, who had been filming everything on his phone, suddenly stopped and stared at the screen in disbelief. "Sarah, look at this," he said, his voice trembling. The video showed not just the lights, but a massive, shadowy figure standing protectively behind Lucas. A figure with intelligent eyes that seemed to peer directly into their souls. "That's my friend," Lucas said simply, reaching out toward the seemingly empty air. "And he has something important to tell you about the new buildings they want to put here, about what's hidden beneath the sleeping giants." The ancient oak's branches swayed, and a shower of golden leaves fell around them. As they touched the ground, they formed a pattern that made Michael's scientific mind race with recognition. It was a geological survey map, but one that showed something the developers had either missed or deliberately ignored in their plans. Sarah's investigative instincts kicked in as she photographed the pattern with her professional camera. What they were seeing could change everything about the mountain's future if they could prove it was real. But as they stood in that magical clearing, one question burned in both parents' minds. How could they protect their son while helping him fulfill what seemed to be his destined role as the bridge between two worlds? Sarah spent the entire night reviewing the photographs she had taken in the clearing, her trained eye catching details that seemed impossible. The geological pattern formed by the golden leaves revealed a complex network of underground springs and caverns, a delicate ecosystem that the luxury resort's construction would destroy. But it was another detail that kept drawing her attention. In every single photo where Lucas appeared, a subtle shimmer of light surrounded him, forming what looked like a protective aura. The next morning, while Lucas was at school, Sarah and Michael met with Dr. Martinez in her private library, a room filled with ancient texts and artifacts related to the mountain's history. The elderly doctor moved carefully among the shelves, pulling out scrolls and documents that had been preserved through generations. "What you experienced in the clearing," Dr. Martinez began, unrolling a weathered map on her desk, "was something my great-grandmother wrote about. She called it the revelation of the Guardians. It happens only when the mountains face a grave threat, and a chosen child is called to help prevent it." Michael ran his fingers through his hair, his medical training battling with what he had witnessed. "But how can we be sure this isn't some sort of elaborate, I don't know, natural phenomenon we simply don't understand yet?" Dr. Martinez smiled knowingly and pulled out an old journal. "Because, Dr. Johnson, your son isn't the first chosen child. There have been others throughout history, always appearing when the mountains needed protection the most, and they all shared the same mark." She opened the journal to reveal sketches of children from different eras, each bearing the same crescent-shaped birthmark as Lucas. But it was the last entry that made Sarah gasp. A photograph from 1973 showing a young Eleanor Martinez herself, standing in the same clearing they had visited, with the same mysterious shimmer around her. "You were chosen too," Sarah whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Yes," Dr. Martinez confirmed, touching her right shoulder unconsciously. And that's why I know exactly what Lucas is experiencing. The Guardian chose me to prevent a mining operation that would have destroyed the mountain's heart. Now, it seems, an even greater threat looms. She spread out several modern documents alongside the ancient ones. The development company, Blue Ridge Ventures, claims they've done all the necessary environmental surveys. But look at these. She pointed to a series of official reports. They've somehow managed to get approval despite multiple geological red flags. Someone is pulling strings, and they're pulling them hard. Michael examined the reports with growing concern. These approval signatures, some of them are from my colleagues at the hospital, the same ones who were pushing so hard for me to take the position here. Because they needed someone with your reputation, Sarah realized, the pieces falling into place. A respected surgeon moving to the area gives legitimacy to their claims about bringing prosperity to the region. A sudden gust of wind blew through the library, though all the windows were closed. The pages of Dr. Martinez's journal fluttered to a specific entry, dated 50 years ago. The text described a prophecy. When the mountains cry out a third time, the final guardian will rise. Through the eyes of a child, the truth will be revealed, and the choice made then will echo through generations. Dr. Martinez's expression grew serious. Lucas is the third chosen child in the mountain's history. This isn't just about stopping a development project. It's about preserving an ancient pact between humans and nature. The Guardian has protected these mountains for centuries, keeping its secrets safe. Now it's asking for our help in return. Sarah pulled out her camera and showed them a series of photos she'd taken that morning. They revealed construction equipment already being moved into position at the base of the mountain, weeks ahead of the officially announced schedule. They're rushing the project, Michael observed, his voice tight with worry. But why? Before Dr. Martinez could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. It was from the school. Lucas had disappeared during recess. The teacher had seen him walking toward the forest line, following what she described as a trail of golden light, and then he had simply vanished. Sarah and Michael jumped to their feet, but Dr. Martinez raised her hand calmly. "Don't panic," she said, her eyes shining with understanding. "The Guardian is showing him something important, something we need to know, and I think I know exactly where they've gone." She pulled out one final document, a map so old its edges crumbled at her touch. In the center was a detailed drawing of a cave system directly beneath the area, marked for the resort's main building. And there, marked in faded ink, was a warning. "Here lies the heart of the mountain. Disturb it, and all shall be lost." Racing against time, Sarah, Michael, and Dr. Martinez followed the ancient map through the dense forest. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, creating dappled shadows that seemed to move with purpose, guiding their way. Dr. Martinez led them along hidden paths that didn't appear on any modern maps, her steps sure despite her age. "The cave system we're looking for," Dr. Martinez explained as they climbed, "is known as the mountain's heart. According to our legends, it contains a source of energy that keeps the entire ecosystem in balance. That's what the Guardian has been protecting all these years." "And you think that's where Lucas is?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern. "I'm certain of it," Dr. Martinez replied. "When I was chosen, the Guardian showed me the heart. It's something that each chosen child needs to see to understand what's truly at stake." They reached a rock face that seemed solid at first glance, but Dr. Martinez pressed her hand against a specific spot, and the crescent mark on her shoulder glowed faintly. A previously invisible opening appeared, leading into the mountain. "How is this possible?" Michael whispered, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "The mountain responds to those it trusts," Dr. Martinez said simply. "The mark isn't just a symbol, it's a key." As they entered the cave, Their flashlights revealed crystalline formations, unlike anything they'd ever seen. The crystals seemed to pulse with an inner light, growing stronger as they ventured deeper. The air was warm and filled with a subtle vibration, like the mountain itself was breathing. Suddenly, they heard Lucas's voice echoing through the chambers, followed by what sounded like a deep, resonant humming. Following the sound, they emerged into a vast cavern that took their breath away. Massive crystals rose from floor to ceiling, pulsing with rainbow-colored light. In the center stood Lucas, his hands pressed against an enormous crystal formation that seemed to be the source of the energy they could feel. But what made them freeze in their tracks was the sight of the Guardian itself. Finally visible in the crystal-lit cavern, it was more magnificent than any of them had imagined. The creature stood nearly 12 feet tall, its dark fur shimmering with hints of silver, and its eyes, those impossibly wise eyes, glowed with the same light as the crystals. "Mom, Dad," Lucas called out excitedly. "The Guardian is showing me why the mountains are special. Look." He pointed to the crystal he was touching, and within its depths, they could see images forming. The entire mountain ecosystem displayed like a living map, showing how everything was connected to this central point. "The heart isn't just a power source," Dr. Martinez explained, her voice filled with awe. "It's a consciousness. The mountain itself is alive, and these crystals are its neural network. The Guardian is its physical manifestation, chosen by the mountain to protect this knowledge." Sarah's photographer's instinct took over, and she raised her camera, but the Guardian made a gentle gesture that she understood immediately. Some things were not meant to be captured on film. Instead, she watched as Lucas began to explain what he was seeing in the crystal. "The sleeping giants, the rocks. In the circle, they're not just rocks," he said, his young voice filled with ancient wisdom. "They're like antennae, connecting to all the other mountains. If they build here, they'll break the connection. The whole mountain range will feel it." Michael stepped forward, his scientific skepticism finally giving way to understanding. "The geological surveys we saw, they weren't just showing water systems, they were showing energy pathways, weren't they?" The Guardian nodded, and suddenly the entire cavern lit up with lines of force, showing how the energy from the heart flowed through the mountain range. The luxury resort's planned location would cut through several major pathways, effectively severing the mountain's vital connections. "But why show us now?" Sarah asked. "Why not reveal this before the development was approved?" The Guardian's response came not in words, but in images that appeared in the crystals. They saw a series of events playing out: the development company's secret meetings, hidden documents, and most shockingly, a discovery they had made during preliminary surveys. They knew about the crystal caverns, but instead of protecting them, they planned to exploit them. "They want to mine the crystals," Dr. Martinez gasped, understanding dawning on her face. "They never intended to build just a resort. That was just a cover story." Lucas stepped away from the crystal, his face serious beyond his years. "The Guardian says we don't have much time. They're starting to dig tonight, not next spring. They found another entrance to the caves." As if to confirm his words, a distant rumbling echoed through the cavern. The crystal's light flickered, and the Guardian's expression changed to one of urgent concern. The mountain was trembling, and somewhere, heavy machinery was breaking through the Earth's crust, heading directly toward the heart. The race to save the mountains had just become a desperate countdown, and they were the only ones who knew what was really at stake. But as they stood in that sacred place, watching the light of centuries pulse through ancient crystal veins, a plan began to form in Sarah's mind. One that would require every skill and connection they had, and perhaps a bit of mountain magic as well. Back in Dr. Martinez's library, an emergency meeting was underway. Sarah spread her photos across the antique desk, while Michael pored over the development company's documents. Time was working against them, but they had one advantage: the knowledge that no one else possessed. "I've been going through the company's financial records," Michael said, pointing to several suspicious transactions. "Blue Ridge Ventures is just a shell company. The real power behind this project is Crystal Technologies, a mining corporation known for exploiting natural resources." Sarah's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she dug deeper into her research. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward the others. Crystal Technologies has a history of mysterious accidents at their mining sites, places where ancient artifacts or unique geological formations were unfortunately destroyed during excavation. Dr. Martinez nodded grimly, pulling out a folder she had kept hidden in a secret compartment of her desk. "They've done this before. 30 years ago, they tried to mine similar crystal formations in the Rockies. The entire site mysteriously collapsed before they could extract anything. The official report blamed natural causes, but..." She paused, her hand unconsciously touching her crescent mark. "The Guardian had siblings in other mountain ranges. They protect their own." Lucas, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "The Guardian says we can't let them reach the heart, but he also says we can't fight them with anger or violence. We have to show them the truth." "The truth?" Michael asked, glancing at his son. "About the connection," Lucas explained, his eyes reflecting wisdom beyond his years. "About how everything is linked together. The Guardian says humans have forgotten how to see the connections, but they can learn again." Sarah's journalistic instincts kicked in. "The media coverage. If we could expose their real plans, show what they're really trying to do here." "It won't be enough," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "They'll deny everything, tie us up in legal battles until it's too late. We need something more concrete." Suddenly, Lucas's crescent mark began to glow faintly, and a warm breeze swept through the library, carrying the scent of sweetberries. The boy's eyes widened with understanding. "The Guardian has a plan," he announced, "but we'll need help from everyone in town, even the people who want the resort." As Lucas explained the Guardian's plan, their eyes widened with understanding. It was audacious, possibly dangerous, but it just might work. They would need to orchestrate a delicate dance between modern technology and ancient magic, between human law and natural wisdom. "I can contact my colleagues at the hospital," Michael offered. "Some of them signed those approvals without knowing the full story. When they learn the truth..." "And I know every journalist within 100 miles, Sarah added. "Once we have proof." "The proof is already here," Dr. Martinez said softly, opening an ancient tome. "We just need to help people see it." As they finalized their plans, a distant rumbling shook the library's windows. The construction crews were moving faster than expected, their machines tearing into the mountain's flesh under cover of darkness. Lucas walked to the window, placing his small hand against the glass. The Guardian's massive shape materialized briefly in the forest's shadows, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. "Tonight," Lucas said, his voice carrying an echo of ancient knowledge. "The Guardian says it has to be tonight." Sarah checked her phone's astronomy app. "The full moon rises in 3 hours. But what's special about tonight?" Dr. Martinez's eyes lit up with recognition. "The crystal moon. It only happens once every 50 years, when the moonlight strikes the mountains at precisely the right angle. The crystals in the heart chamber will be at their most powerful." "And most vulnerable," Michael added, understanding dawning on his face. A plan was taking shape, but it would require perfect timing and cooperation from some unlikely allies. As they gathered their materials and prepared to set their plan in motion, they could hear the machines getting closer, feel the mountain trembling beneath their feet. Sarah looked at her son, standing brave and determined, despite the enormous responsibility that had been placed on his young shoulders. The Guardian had chosen well, she realized. Sometimes it took a child's pure heart to remind adults of the truths they had forgotten. "The mountain has always protected us," Lucas said, touching his glowing mark. "Now it's our turn to protect it. The Guardian says that's how the balance works." As they left the library, the evening sky was painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. They had 3 hours until the crystal moon rose. 3 hours to save an ancient pact, protect a sacred place, and perhaps remind humanity of its forgotten connection to the natural world. The Guardian's shadow moved through the trees, leading the way. The final battle for the mountain's heart was about to begin, and it would take every ounce of courage, wisdom, and faith they possessed to win it. The town hall meeting room had never been so crowded, despite the late hour. It seemed like every resident of Blue Ridge had answered Sarah's emergency call. The tension in the air was palpable as Dr. Martinez took the podium, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Fellow citizens," she began, her voice carrying the weight of generations, "what I'm about to show you will challenge everything you believe about our mountains." She nodded to Sarah, who dimmed the lights and started a presentation. The first images were from Sarah's camera, crystal-clear shots of the construction sites, overlaid with the geological surveys Michael had obtained. Gasps filled the room as they saw the true extent of the planned excavation. But that's not all. Michael stepped forward, his professional reputation lending credibility to their cause. "These are the real financial documents behind Blue Ridge Ventures." The screen showed a complex web of shell companies, all leading back to Crystal Technologies. Mayor Thompson, a tall man with weathered features, stood up. "Dr. Johnson, are you suggesting that the resort project is a fraud?" "Not a fraud, Mayor," Sarah interjected, advancing to the next slide. "A cover-up. They're not building a resort. They're planning to mine these." She displayed photos of the crystal formations, carefully edited, to protect the heart's exact location while showing their magnificent scale. The room erupted in murmurs. Jennifer Chen, the high school science teacher, raised her hand. "Those formations, they're unlike anything I've ever seen. The energy readings must be extraordinary." "They are," Dr. Martinez confirmed, "and they're connected to something far more important." She revealed the ancient maps, showing how the crystal networks connected the entire mountain range. Lucas, who had been sitting quietly beside his parents, suddenly stood up. The crescent mark on his shoulder began to glow softly, visible even through his shirt. A hush fell over the crowd. "The mountains are alive," he said, his clear voice carrying to every corner of the room. "They've always protected us, given us clean water, fresh air, and a home. The Guardian has watched over them for centuries, but now they need our help." As if on cue, the lights in the town hall flickered, and through the windows, everyone could see an unusual golden glow emanating from the forest. The Guardian's massive silhouette was briefly visible, confirming Lucas's words in a way no document could. Mayor Thompson's face had grown pale. "My grandfather used to tell stories about the Guardian," he said slowly. "We all thought they were just legends, but..." He turned to face the crowd. "I signed those development permits, believing we were bringing progress to our town. I was wrong." "It's not too late," Sarah urged, showing the next slide. "But we have less than 2 hours before they reach the crystal heart of the mountain. They're working under cover of darkness to avoid environmental inspectors." The room exploded with questions and suggestions, but it was Tom Wilson, the local construction foreman, who offered the key to their plan. "I've got 3 bulldozers and a crew that would rather protect these mountains than destroy them," he announced. "Just tell us what you need." He reached for his phone to call for reinforcements, but at that moment, something extraordinary happened. The crystal moon's light intensified, and through the Guardian's power, everyone present began to see what Lucas had been shown in the heart chamber: the living, breathing essence of the mountain, the delicate balance of its ecosystem, and the devastating consequences of destroying it. The vision was so vivid, so real, that even the most hardened workers lowered their equipment. One by one, Crawford's men stepped away from their machines, choosing to stand with the townspeople instead. But as the crystal moon approached its zenith, a new crisis emerged. The excavation work that had already been done had destabilized part of the mountain. A low rumble began to build, and cracks appeared in the ground near the construction site. The Guardian's eyes met Lucas's, and in that moment, both knew what needed to be done. The mountain's heart was at risk, and only a combination of ancient magic and modern unity could save it. The crystal moon reached its zenith, bathing the mountain in an otherworldly glow. The Guardian, Lucas, and Dr. Martinez stood at the center of the crisis, their crescent marks blazing with shared power. The ground continued to shake as the earlier excavation work threatened to trigger a catastrophic collapse. "Everyone, join hands," Dr. Martinez called out, her voice carrying ancient wisdom. "The mountain needs our energy, our unity." The townspeople formed a circle, linking hands with the construction workers who had abandoned Crawford's cause. Jennifer Chen's crystal resonance equipment hummed at a frequency that matched the tolling church bells, creating a harmonious web of energy. "The arrogance of you people," Crawford spat, backing away from the scene. "You'd sacrifice progress, jobs, economic growth, all for some mystical light show?" Sarah, still documenting everything with her camera, stepped forward. "No, Mr. Crawford. We're choosing sustainability over greed, wisdom over profit, and community over corporations." Lucas walked to the center of the circle, guided by the Guardian's presence. "The mountain doesn't belong to anyone," he announced, his young voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We belong to it." As if responding to his words, the crystal network throughout the mountain blazed brighter. The Guardian raised its massive arms, channeling the crystal moon's energy through the ancient bell tower, through Jennifer's equipment, and through the linked hands of the townspeople. Michael, watching in awe, suddenly understood the science behind the magic. "The resonance pattern," he exclaimed. "It's stabilizing the geological structure." The cracks in the ground began to seal themselves as the mountain's natural healing powers, amplified by the crystal moon and the unified energy of the community, worked to repair the damage. Even Crawford's most sophisticated mining equipment began to short-circuit, overwhelmed by the pure energy flowing through the area. But the effort was taking its toll. Lucas swayed on his feet, the power flowing through him almost too much for his young body to handle. The Guardian moved closer, its massive form providing support and protection, sharing the burden of channeling such tremendous energy. Dr. Martinez's voice cut through the humming resonance. "The crystal moon's apex is passing. We need more power to complete the healing." That's when something remarkable happened. From the surrounding forests, more figures emerged. Guardians from other mountains, drawn by the crisis, coming to aid their sibling. Their combined presence amplified the healing energy exponentially. Crawford watched in disbelief as his carefully laid plans crumbled before forces he couldn't control or comprehend. His phone was useless, his equipment dead, and his workers had turned against him. In a final act of desperation, he rushed toward his SUV, intent on escape. But the mountain had other plans. The crystal energy field simply stopped his vehicle from starting, leaving him to witness the full power of nature's triumph over industrial greed. As the healing energy reached its peak, the mountain released one final pulse of power. The crystal moon's light seemed to pierce every shadow, revealing the truth that had been hidden for so long. The living, breathing essence of the natural world and humanity's place within it, not above it. The crystal moon's energy began to fade, but its effects remained visible across the mountain. The joined hands of the townspeople slowly lowered, their faces reflecting awe at what they had just experienced. The network of crystal formations continued to pulse with a gentle light, now permanently visible to all who knew to look for it. Lucas, exhausted but smiling, leaned against the Guardian's protective form. The other mountain guardians remained at the forest's edge, their presence a testament to the interconnectedness of the natural world. Dr. Martinez approached Crawford, who sat defeated beside his useless vehicle. "Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice firm but compassionate. "The mountain has shown you its truth. What you do with that knowledge is now your choice." Crawford looked up, his facade of corporate confidence crumbling. "All my life I've pursued what I thought was progress. But this," he gestured at the glowing crystal network, "this is beyond anything I could have imagined." Sarah stepped forward, her camera hanging at her side. "The real progress lies in understanding and protecting what we already have. Our town doesn't need a luxury resort or a mining operation. It needs guardians. All of us." The Guardian made a gesture, and the crystal formations released a shower of light that settled over the gathered crowd. As it touched each person, they gasped in wonder. Everyone could now see what Lucas had been seeing: the living energy of the mountain, the delicate balance of its ecosystem, and their own place within it. "The Guardian's gift," Dr. Martinez explained, touching her crescent mark. "The ability to see the truth has been shared with all." Michael, examining the formerly damaged ground with his scientific eye, marveled at the transformation. The crystal network isn't just an energy source, it's a healing system. Imagine what we could learn if we studied it respectfully, without trying to exploit it. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. "Mr. Crawford, I believe it's time we discussed a different kind of development for our town, one that preserves and protects rather than destroys." Crawford nodded slowly, a lifetime of perspective shifting in a single night. "I'll need to make some calls to propose a very different kind of project to my board." He looked at Lucas and the Guardian. "Perhaps a research center focused on sustainable energy and environmental preservation?" The Guardian's approval radiated through the crystal network, creating a ripple of warm light that spread across the mountainside. The other Guardians began to retreat into their forests, their mission accomplished, but the connection they helped forge remained strong. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Lucas turned to his parents. "The Guardian says this is just the beginning. The mountain will keep teaching us if we're willing to learn." Sarah hugged her son close, feeling the warmth of his crescent mark even through his shirt. "And we'll be here to document and protect it, won't we?" The town of Blue Ridge had changed forever. The crystal moon had revealed not just the mountain's secrets, but the power of unity between the modern world and ancient wisdom. As the sun rose over the protected peaks, it illuminated a community forever transformed by their night of enlightenment and shared purpose. The weeks following the crystal moon brought dramatic changes to Blue Ridge. Crystal Technologies, under Crawford's transformed leadership, withdrew their original plans and proposed a groundbreaking partnership with the town. The new Blue Ridge Environmental Research Center would study the mountain's unique properties while ensuring its preservation. Sarah's photographs and documentation of that night had gone viral, catching the attention of major environmental organizations worldwide. But more importantly, they captured something that had never been photographed before: the Guardian and its mountain siblings, visible in the crystal moon's light, their ancient wisdom now undeniable. Dr. Martinez's clinic had become a hub for a new kind of healing, combining modern medicine with the mountain's natural energy. Michael worked alongside her, his scientific background helping bridge the gap between traditional medical practices and the Crystal Network's therapeutic properties. Lucas continued his special connection with the Guardian, but he was no longer alone in his ability to see the mountain's magic. The entire town had become a community of guardians, each person playing their part in protecting the delicate balance they now understood. The crescent marks that had once been rare now appeared on others throughout the town, not glowing as brightly as those of the chosen ones, but present nonetheless, a sign of their commitment to the mountain's protection. Jennifer Chen's science students had started a junior guardian program, combining their technical knowledge with the ancient wisdom Dr. Martinez shared. One evening, as the family stood at their kitchen window, watching the sunset paint the crystal formations in brilliant colors, Sarah noticed something remarkable. The Guardian wasn't just protecting the mountain anymore. It was teaching, sharing its knowledge with those who showed genuine interest in learning.
"Mom," Lucas said, his eyes reflecting the crystal light. "The Guardian says we've started something bigger than our town. Other mountains are awakening their crystals too."
Michael smiled, putting an arm around his son's shoulders. The world wasn't ready for this knowledge before, but maybe now, with what we've learned about balance and respect. A soft glow from the forest caught their attention. The Guardian stood at the tree line, and behind it, the mountain pulsed with living energy, its crystal heart beating in harmony with the community that had chosen to protect it. 1 year later, Blue Ridge had become a model for environmental harmony. The research center, built with sustainable materials and powered by crystal energy, attracted scientists and environmentalists from around the world, but access to the mountain's heart remained restricted, protected by both human guardians and the ancient power they served. Crawford had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Now heading the center's conservation department, he worked tirelessly to protect other natural sites from the very type of exploitation he once championed. His testimony before Congress about the importance of preserving natural energy sources had helped pass groundbreaking environmental protection laws. On a crisp autumn evening, as the town gathered for their annual Crystal Moon Festival, Lucas stood with his parents and Dr. Martinez at the center of the celebration. The Guardian's massive form was clearly visible now to all who attended, a testament to the new relationship between humans and nature. "The mountain no longer needs to hide its magic," Dr. Martinez said, her crescent mark glowing softly, "because we've finally learned to be worthy of its trust." Sarah, who had just finished a documentary about Blue Ridge's transformation, watched as children played near the crystal formations, their laughter mixing with the harmonious hum of the mountain's energy. Her camera captured not just images now, but the living spirit of a community in tune with its environment. Michael had established a new branch of medical research, studying how the crystal energy could complement traditional treatments. The results were promising, showing how ancient wisdom and modern science could work together for the greater good. As the festival reached its peak, Lucas stepped forward to address the gathered crowd, the Guardian standing proudly behind him. "A year ago, we thought we had to choose between progress and preservation," he said, his young voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "But the mountain showed us that real progress comes from understanding our place in nature's balance." The crystal formations pulsed with agreement, their light spreading across the mountainside like a living aurora. The Guardian raised its massive form, and for the first time in recorded history, it spoke, not in words, but in images and emotions that everyone could understand. It showed them visions of other mountains awakening, other communities learning the same lessons, a wave of enlightenment spreading across the world. As the evening drew to a close, the townspeople joined hands once again, not to defend against a threat this time, but to celebrate their unity with each other and the natural world. The Crystal Network glowed with approval, its light a promise of hope for future generations. Lucas smiled up at the Guardian, their connection now a symbol of what was possible when humanity chose to listen to the ancient wisdom of the natural world. The mountain had not just been saved, it had become a beacon of light, showing a new way forward for all who were willing to see it. Dear viewers, we hope you've been touched by this tale of harmony between humanity and nature. For more inspiring stories that explore the magic that exists in our world, check out our special playlist by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day, we bring you unique stories that remind us of the wonders that surround us. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what the Guardian's message means to you. Until our next adventure, may you always see the magic in the world around you.